What's up, fam? It is your girl Lo. I am finally back and better than ever. I have been working on this project for quite a while. It's a little passion project of mine. I'm excited to finally get it going, and it is going to be called Lace 'em Up with Lo. I have quite a few cool friends I've met throughout working in the sport industry over the years, and I've been kind of wanting to share some of their stories. They have some unique stories. They all work in some fun areas of the sport industry, and they all come from different backgrounds. They all have different career choices, and I think it's cool to share their stories. Some of them don't get told all that often. Some of them you might hear sometimes, but not as unique as some of them have. And my first guest today, I am very excited for. We've been talking for quite a while. I'm excited. I know she's excited, even though she'll try to say the opposite. I am here with Kelli Meyer. She is an AT currently working for the Worcester Junior Railers. How are you doing today, Kelli? It's good to have you here.
I'm good. Hey, kiddo. I'm glad you're finally getting this kicked off. Nice to see it
It's a
heading in
long
this
time
direction.
coming, but I'm
Yeah.
excited to get it going, and I'm grateful you decided to be my first guest. I know you've been a little nervous for it, but I'm excited to have you on here. I think you have a fun story to tell.
Well, no one just usually asks about what we do. The Damar Hamlin thing kind of brought a lot more attention to athletic trainers and what they do and what it looks like. So, but for the longest time, for most of my career, it's been like you've been kind of like in the wings in the back. And, there was a post or a meme somewhere that somebody made of, until athletic trainers get recognized for, the time that we put in and the relationships we develop and all that stuff, we'll set a full hi mom on the interviews because like that's it's hard to explain sometimes what it looks like. And when, especially athletes only have a couple seconds with a mic shoved in their face to try to explain what all goes on in there. So, but yeah, hopefully this is a good place for you to start. Hopefully not everybody's bored.
Oh no, I think it's definitely going to be exciting. I know you've got some fun stories in there. I've heard a few of them. I've been a part of a few of them, so I'm definitely excited to get them out there in the world. But it's true what you said, and it's like, yeah, you're like in the background, but what people don't realize is how big of a role you play and like how much of an impact you do have on these players, which is what I'm excited to get into. So you do AT, like I mentioned. Talk to me about how you kind of got into that. I think you've told me you played sports a little bit growing up. How did you kind of switch into doing athletic training?
So I got hurt. I was an injured athlete, and I had to spend a decent amount of time in the athletic training room with, his name was Jason Fish. I don't know if he'll ever see this, but I'm here because of him. So, I had a chronic knee problem as a softball player, as a catcher. I was in the training room a lot, and Jason took the time to get to know me as a person, not just as an injured athlete. I had seen a bunch of doctors and stuff, and and physical therapists, and they were only interested in my injured body part. And Jason, after doing rehab, would sit with me and be like, "Oh, how's school going? That boyfriend you have out of state, how's that going? Mom and dad, everything cool?" And like when it came down to I could either have surgery or just continue to go the way that I was, I kind of didn't care what my parents had to say. I wanted to find out what Jason said. And because I trusted him, like with everything I had in me, because he was there the whole time. And, when it came down to it, he told me he couldn't tell me what to do, but he's like, "You've tried everything you can do." So because of his, I don't want to say blessing because you're not supposed to, we can't tell anybody to have surgery or to not. But because of his encouragement, I had surgery and ended up being much better off. And then I realized that, I could do that for somebody else, and doing that and combining, that with my absolute love of sports was like a perfect medium. I didn't want to be a physical therapist because I didn't want to work with little kids or old people. I wanted to work with athletes, and I didn't know that you could, my mom, the special ed person, was like, "You really can't do that. That's discriminating." I don't really want to work with old people or kids. I want to work with a specific group of kids. And lo and behold, athletic training exists. So I get to work. I don't have to work with kids, little kids or old people. I can work with the niche of an age group that I want to. So, and I get to watch, I'm not an athlete anymore, but I get to be a part of it all the time. So it's like the best of both worlds.
I think what you said is very true, and I've kind of experienced that myself doing like all these interviews and things. It's like yes, you can, like, a lot of people just see them as the athletes, but when I get to like sit down and tell them stories and we're sitting there and you're working on them, you want to make sure you like focus on that they're human too. Yes, they are like
Yeah.
this athlete and they are doing, I guess, a job essentially, but they're a person too. They have feelings. Like they have big
Hmm.
feelings sometimes, as I know you've learned. And it's like you gotta remember that sometimes and not just like treat them as the one thing. You have to remember like they are a person too. They feel things. They matter too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the part that interests me the most too, is kind of the psychology behind it of why we're athletes and what makes us do what we do. And then when you get hurt, how crazy are you to go back and do the thing that hurt you? Like in any other relationship in your life, that's a toxic relationship and you'd be encouraging people to get away from that and don't do that again. But with sports, we're like, no, 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 go
Absolutely.
back and do it. So like rehabbing and dealing with that person physically and mentally too, like it's a whole other facet that is very interesting to me. And sometimes it kind of gets overlooked, which is unfortunate. But I try to make a point to not to make sure it's not overlooked, because you have to be. It's almost like an alternative definition of insanity to go back to the thing that took so much time and caused you so much pain and all of that to you and took away from you to go walk back in and willingly do it again. Of like, thank you, sir. Can I have another? Is kind of insane to think of in any other facet. But here we are encouraging it and not only expecting it but encouraging it. So it's a little crazy. And it makes me scratch my head and it makes me laugh too. That's what we do. But that's kind of what I'm responsible for.
And so you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but talk to me a little bit about what your relationship is like with the players and how you kind of help them through these like big emotions and big feelings that they deal with.
I kind of feel like I'm mom away from mom. For some of them, they haven't been away from home before. And, even when I was working at a high school or in a college, I was closer to their age, but it was like another person there to kind of be able to create a safe space for them to have those big feelings, which sometimes means you catch all of them, good and bad, because you're the one that's there. You're the trusted one that they're okay to be vulnerable in front of. So you kind of have to remember that it's a good thing that you get to see them that way, but it's not always the easiest to see them that way. But to know that like I'm trusted enough to get to see a side of some of these players that most people don't get to see is very humbling to know that's that I'm one of the few, or maybe in some instances the only person that gets to see that side. But it's just being able to be somebody's safe space and soft place to land when they need it, because it sucks sometimes to not have that or to feel like you don't have that. So that's kind of like my main like motive of doing what I do is to, obviously keep them healthy and obviously keep them safe, but like that doesn't just mean physically. It means mentally and emotionally and socially as well, because that all goes into, it's all good. Like you said, it all goes into who you are as a person. So you can't just take care of one facet, you have to take care of all of them.
Absolutely. And that's kind of become more of like a prevalent thing too nowadays with like talking about mental health in sports. And it's been kind of really cool to see people being more open about it. And like, I want to say it was Naomi Osaka. She like took time off, and Simone Biles has taken time off like to kind of get back to their mental health and make sure they're in like a good enough state to really want to be doing what they love, because they kind of become so like used to being an athlete and everyone focusing on the fact that they're an athlete and they're doing all these really cool things and they're winning all these awards and like winning all these tournaments and things, but then they forget that like they're a person too, and all that stress and all the people like talking about them and putting so much pressure on them really gets to you after a while, and they sometimes finally need to take a step back and be like, whoa, like I'm still a person. I need to kind of take a step back to remind myself why I'm doing this.
Yeah, there was an art when I was in college, so I'm going to date myself and how old I am, which is, I don't remember if I sent you my resume. You know how old I am. But when I was in college, I was in a sports psychology class, and I had the most interesting sports psych professor I could have imagined. Like he actually stood up in front of the class and stick handled, like while he was talking, because he was so ADD and so shiny that he needed to either pace or, duh, right here too. Like that's me too. I have to do something to keep moving. But he was talking about Michael Phelps, and when Michael Phelps went to college, or he went to a party at a buddy's college or whatever, he was photographed smoking pot. And it was like, they should take his medals away from him. They should do this, they should do that, and punish him. And he was like, for what? For being a 19-year-old?
Yeah.
For doing what all other 19-year-old college kids, or 90% of 19-year-old kids are doing? You want to ostracize the one?
Just because he's a high-powered athlete.
Because he had the medals, because he had the notoriety, because he had the endorsements, because he had
Yes.
all of that. You're going to take away a normal experience for him and take that away from him because he's being a kid?
Yes.
Like that's what you forget is you're still a kid. You're still a kid. My husband and I would get in arguments about this all the time. He's a huge UT, University of Texas fan of like, oh, and these kids, and talking about commitments and stuff. I was like, you're asking 17, 18, and 19-year-old children to make one of the biggest decisions of their lives.
Yep.
And everybody's getting butthurt because y'all think they made the wrong one. They are children.
Yeah.
They're still kids, and they still should deserve to be kids, and not. And a lot of times, because they're so mature and they're so physically developed and talented at what they do, that part gets left off in thinking and forgetting that they are in fact down, all the way down at the bottom. They're still a kid. They're somebody's baby. They're someone's kid. So
Yes.
that's the thing that I look at too, is that's someone's kid that I'm working with. And if my kid is ever away from me in that kind of a facet, I would want somebody to look at her like she's somebody's baby too. So that's, that's the whole thing behind it is there, you gotta still be a kid too, because as somebody who's not a kid anymore and wishes so badly I could go back and take back just a little bit of time, embrace it.
Oh yeah.
So you need to enjoy it while you have it.
Yes, I've heard that quite a bit, and I honestly I felt it a lot too since leaving college, because it's you're being more of an adult a little bit at college, because for some people it's your first time away from home for long periods of time, so it's you're finally getting a taste of what it's like to fully be yourself and be an adult and do your own thing and make sure you try to follow a schedule and get things done and choose how you're gonna run your life.
Yeah.
And if you make the wrong decisions, it can really have a bad impact down the line. So it's a lot of pressure, and it relates to sports where it's these young kids, like you said, with the fact that they're 17, 18, it's almost like you're asking them to vote already, and because they're picking something to essentially do for 4 years, unless they decide somewhere in those 4 years, hey, I don't like this place, I want to try something different. They're essentially choosing a 4-year term of this is where I'm going to be and what I'm going to do for the next couple years. So it's a lot of pressure to put on somebody.
And it's a huge decision. It's your picking where you're going to college, whether you're an athlete or not, is your first real big decision that most of the time your parents don't really give you much other than, well, it's your decision. You have to be there. You're the one that has to go to school there. You have to like it. You have to be there.
Yes.
And to do it for some of these kids, to do it on such a big scale like that, or to decide to go so far away or whatever it is, to make that first decision like that, almost completely alone, 100% independent, that's your first decision. It's insane. I can't even, because I remember sitting at, talking to my mom being well, I don't know, this one has this, but then this one has this, I don't know what I should do. And she's like, well, you have to decide. Can you help me? And she went, nope. I can sit here and talk it through with you, but you have to decide.
Yep.
You have to make that decision, because Kelli has to be happy with the decision that Kelli made and not be mad or anything because of what somebody else made for her. You have to make that decision. So it's a really big kick in the ass to get as a 17 or 18-year-old kid, because, your brain's not even fully formed till you're 25. So you're still a kid until you're almost 30. So, it's a big decision.
Oh yes. And yeah, it's a lot, and it weighs a lot on people, and it's interesting to see how everybody deals with it. And you see it a lot with the injuries too. It's it becomes similar to that, where it's like you have these big injuries and it's like, okay, do I decide to try to push through it and keep playing, or do I have to finally decide that this might be it and I can't come back from this? Like, it's a lot to take in.
And that's another interesting part too. That's always been a very interesting thing for me, because another teacher of mine, who she was not the sports psychology teacher, but she has a ton of stuff published in and around sports psychology. When we were talking about this as in a class, because we have to learn how to do this in a class, it's almost like being a doctor and telling somebody like bad news. You have to learn how to be there when it happens.
Yes.
And she said, athletes who come to an ending of their athletic career outside of their own power, so if they have a catastrophic injury, not necessarily death, but like a season-ending or career-ending injury, they will mourn that portion of their personality the same way they would mourn if someone they loved died.
Absolutely.
Because they have spent so much time and so much energy and so much of themselves building up that persona, that they forget that they're someone's son or daughter or brother or sister or boyfriend or girlfriend or friend or teammate. Like, they forget that there are so many more facets to them than just that one thing that they can't do now.
100%.
But they focus on that one thing, and there are some times that it sends them into a pretty deep depression, because they're mourning the part of them that's not able to do that thing anymore. And
yes.
and part of my job and a part of our job as the sports medicine person that's there with them all the time, or that gets to know them on that level, is we have to help them through that. And it's insanely rewarding, but it's also immensely heartbreaking to have to be the one to tell the kid, which I've had to do, I'm sorry, your senior year of football, you're not going to have it. And just to sit there with them while they're having all of that, while they're letting that hit them and have that come to realization, is again one of the most rewarding things, because they let you see that, but then you have to deal with it too, because you've had to watch that, and it's not a thing to it's not a pretty part of the job, but it's necessary. So you kind of have to weigh it out a little bit, and figure out how you deal with it when you leave the situation yourself, because you have to carry it too for them, because you just watched it happen.
Oh yes.
But it's
absolutely.
very interesting to see what happens when you make the decision to no longer be an athlete, like what you go through to do that.
Yes. And that's what was fun with me when I've done like commitment interviews with guys in the past. It's like, it's fun to see kind of what other interests they have and kind of get that out of them, because it's like, I get you're a hockey player, an athlete, like that's been your life, but it's like, I know you have something else in there. It's like, and it's fun.
You need a hobby.
Like, and we were joking about it before we started recording. It's like, I have hockey stuff on the wall. You've got your baseball stuff back there. It's like, we have other interests. Like, there's things we like there's other like things about us. Like, we're not just this like one note person. It's like, yeah, you've played like hockey, or you played football, you played this forever, but you're more than just that. You're not just this athlete. You're not just this sports player. Like, there's more to you. You just like kind of have forgotten it a little bit, because it's like you've been so focused on this one thing. So when that one thing is no longer there, you forget at a certain point. You're like, what else do I like? Where do I go next? Like, what else do I have? Because it's like you've just been so in this one lane that you forget you have these other lanes you can go, because you have other things you enjoy doing. You just kind of put them on the back burner a little bit because you were just so excited about and focused on like the one sport that you're in. And
that's where you got the most like praise and attention too.
Absolutely.
Like, that's where you got the most like most encouragement and most whatever from external sources, was that thing.
Yes.
And then that thing goes away. Mm-hmm. Or you might not want to do that thing anymore. So then where else do you fit, and how do you make that work? And it's interesting to watch them go through that sometimes.
And that's what's kind of neat too, because it's fun to see if they stay with the sport in certain facets, whether they do, like you said, like you do with AT, or like they get into coaching, or like they stick around the sport somehow, because they're like, I love it so much, I don't want to leave it, even though I can't play it anymore. I still want to be able to give back and be around the sport still. And
sometimes they can't till later on.
Yes.
Once like the breakup is, solidified, and their broken hearts healed and things like that. Yeah. So, most always it comes back to them, coming back in some way, shape, or form. If maybe not how maybe it just might look different now than it used to.
Oh, yes. So, and talking about like all those kind of like experiences, what have been some of like the most kind of memorable or most like impactful ones for you?
Oh, so memorable in different ways. Like I've had things that have hit me in different ways of that it, based on how they happened, and some are great things and some are not good things.
Oh yeah.
But it just kind of sits with you because you can't you kind of can't let it go.
Yes.
I've had a high school football quarterback who, when I was pregnant with my daughter, told me that he was going to be her godfather, and I was like, that's not up to you. But thank you for that. I had that same kid offered to be a reference for a job when I was leaving there.
There you go.
So I've never taken him up on it, and it's been a long time, so I'm pretty sure I missed the boat on that, but that's okay. But I've gotten to see one of the more memorable ones is when I was out in New Mexico, and you can ask me about that after, of how in God's name I ended up from Massachusetts all the way out in New Mexico. But we had a kid who partially tore his ACL in the beginning of his senior season as a running back and cornerback. And he didn't tear it all the way. So the doctor said he could continue to play until he tore it the rest of the way, because either he were going to have to go in and tear it surgically, or it was going to happen organically. And he would rather have had it happen organically. And the kid was like, oh yeah, that means I get to play the rest of my football season. So he did. He was braced up. He did rehab. He was super compliant. He was great. He was one of the best kids we had that was going through rehab with us. And last game of the season, second round of the playoffs, to kind of determine who was making it towards like that Super Bowl run, we were on this terrible grass field in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I don't even remember the school we were playing, but it was awful.
I'm sure it was nice and dry.
Out of bounds. You'd be surprised, because when it rains there, it just monsoons. Like it's almost like you're in a car wash, like forever, and then all of a sudden it just stops. But it was the terrain of the field. We were inside of 2 minutes, and we were trying to get that last to tie it, or to keep, I forget if we were in overtime or going for overtime or something like that, but it was 2 minutes. We were doing 2-minute drill, and he ran outside to stop the clock, stepped in a hole, and knee gave out the rest of the way.
Oh.
And that was it. We lost the game. He missed his senior year of basketball, but then he absolutely kicked ass and rehabbed all winter long, and ended up being state champion for New Mexico for pole vault that year. Wow. And when I saw him afterwards, he was walking around school with the medal on that he won from winning the championship. I was like,
showed off.
He did. He was with the shirt on and everything, and I was like, "Bud, I'm so proud of you." And he was like, I almost don't deserve this. Like, what are you talking about? You don't deserve this. Like, you tore it. You finished tearing your ACL in November. You rehabbed all winter, and now in May you've come and you've won. You're state champion for pole vault. Like, what are you talking about? And he goes, but I couldn't have done it without you and Chris. Oh. And I was like, oh, someone's cutting onions in here. I had to walk away from him.
Like, did I wear the waterproof makakeup today?
I was like, I don't cry at work. I don't cry people don't see me cry. Like, I don't know. I can count the number of people on one hand that have seen me cry at work. But I was like, I can't cry at work. I had to walk away from him. I hugged him and I walked away. And that was like one of the craziest things, of like him saying that he almost didn't feel like he deserved all of it because he needed help to do it. Like, well, that's what we're here for. That's why we do it. So you can go do those things. So, that was another like super memorable, like holy crap. Another one was a hockey player a couple of years ago who had a pretty catastrophic injury on the ice, and I was the athletic trainer covering the game, and it was an away game. I shouldn't have been there, but they didn't have their athletic trainer, and I got asked to go and cover because they were playing us, and I obviously didn't have anything to do that day, so I followed everybody up there. and ran out onto the ice and dealt with him, got him out in the ambulance and got everything taken care of. And he came back to the rink a couple days later, and he looked at me and on his crutches and everything and said, "You have no idea how happy I was that when I opened my eyes and knowing, I laid there with my eyes shut, feeling everything that I felt in my leg, and then I opened my eyes and you were the one that was sitting over me, and it wasn't somebody that I didn't know." He's like, I don't know what I would have done if it wasn't you." I was like, again with the onions, okay? like
This
oh,
is so
really
rude,
sweet.
but thank you.
Yeah. And then minimal amount of games, and came back in his first game and scored a goal. And I without him knowing, took the puck and taped it and had it upstairs when he came up to stretch out afterwards, and I had it. And I gave him the puck, and he looked at me and he pulled the puck out of his pocket. And I was like, "No, this is the real one. Like I have it. This is the actual one. I got it." And he said, "No, but I want you to have it." I went, "Why me?" He goes, "Because without you behind me, I wouldn't have done it." And I was like, No. I can't keep the puck that you actually scored. Like, I can't. No, this is yours. This one's yours. And he's like, "Well, but I want you to have it." And I was like, "Okay, we'll trade. You get the game puck, and I'll get the one that you thought was the game puck, and we'll call it good." And he was like, "Okay." So he wrote on the side of it of like, "Thanks for," I forget what the side of it says, but like, I had him sign it in case it's worth something someday, or not that I'm going to do anything with it, but it's for me. But to, because it's a lot of telling people that they can't do stuff, or limiting things, or kind of being the bad guy. So when a couple of times you can be the good guy, it kind of helps offset all the times that you have to be the grim reaper and the bearer of bad news for people. So those are a couple of like the better, like, softy kind of ones. There's definitely, there's not a loss of humor or sense of humor or comedy in my life, thanks to what I do for a job.
You've talked about people coming from like a bunch of other places, like for the first time, and kind of exploring new areas on their own. You've kind of done the same thing. Not everybody's path is on the straight and narrow. Everybody kind of goes different ways with things. Talk to me a little bit about how you ended up where you are today.
So I graduated from undergrad and was a grad student in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, Eastern New Mexico University in Portales, New Mexico, which it's essentially an extension of West Texas. It's closer to like Lubbock and Amarillo, Texas than it is to the rest of the state of New Mexico. Albuquerque is like 4.5 hours away. Santa Fe was 5 hours away. So I went out there to be a GA, and while I was in the GA program, my advisor was less than helpful. It wasn't a program I really wanted, and she was she kind of, when she found out that I had ADHD and a learning disability, she kind of like almost gasped that, like, how could I, a lowly learning disabled student, be in her graduate program, which a shiny neurodivergent learning disabled folks, we can do an awful lot, just closed-minded people. And when I met with her to talk about what should have been my final semester of a 2-year program, she informed me that I was a year behind class-wise, and what do you call it? Degree plan wise.
Yes.
Yep. So I was like, okay, this sucks. She was not very helpful at all for an advisor. That I was on my own a lot, and it wasn't something that I could handle on my own, which is why I went to the advisor. And things still didn't go the way that
Funny how that works.
Yeah. So I was presented with an opportunity to become a head athletic trainer of a semi-professional arena football team in Amarillo, Texas at the age of 25. And I said, screw grad school. I want this, because at the time there were 2 schools of thought, one that was the education background route and one that was experience. So I took the experience route. My best friend took the education route, and we both ended up very differently. So I abandoned my GA ship a year and a half in to go and live in a hotel room for 6 months and travel around the state of Texas in a sleeper bus with all of these guys, 2 other females. The owner was female, and the special teams coach was female, and me. That was it, the 3 of us, all guys and just us. and it was the craziest 6 months of my life. Um, then I had a decision to make whether I wanted to stay out in New Mexico or I wanted to come back to Boston. And I had started dating my now husband, then boyfriend, and he was in the military and he had to stay. So if I left, he was staying regardless. So I had to decide what was the right thing for me. And I decided to stay because I wanted to see what would happen and what I could do out there. And, I had the freedom. My family was super supportive to me staying out there. So I stayed, and I then worked with a friend of mine who I met as a GA. He was working at a doctor's office. He actually had the Amarillo Venom job before I did, and we ended up working together. He was the head athletic trainer for Clovis High School, and I became his assistant around Halloween of 2013. And then for 2 years, he and I worked together, and we were a 6A high school in New Mexico, which meant we had about 650 athletes from grades 10 to 12.
Oh my
So there was a
gosh.
freshman academy that we didn't deal with because they were their own.
Oh my gosh.
We had 4 football teams. We had freshman A, we had freshman, JVA, JVB, and varsity.
Oh my.
3 basketball teams for each gender.
Wow.
2 soccer teams. It was crazy. And we were the only sports medicine clinic as far as like physical therapy was, aside from the military base, for 90 miles.
Oh.
We had the first year that I was there, the first like 12-month stint that I was there, Chris actually kept track. We had rehabbed 9 ACLs in my first 12 months from October 2013 to October 2014.
That's almost once a month. That's insane.
Yeah. Yep. We had 9 kids do it. So, and it was insane. We did rehab with them. They out there, they have, they get PE credits to be athletes, which is not like that here. You have to participate in PE in order to play your game, where they, the first or last period of the day, you're an athlete for that period, and then you carry on with your day. So they could come in and do rehab as part of like their class. So it helped in that sense. And then I got pregnant with my daughter, and I had my daughter out there. And after that, I kind of changed my mind on where I wanted to be. I wanted to come home. I wanted to be closer to my family, because I was 22 hours away from my family, 8 hours by car from my husband's family. So I wanted to come back home. And my husband was out of the military at the time. He was going to school, or was going to go to school. So he got into Northeastern with their Yellow Ribbon program as a military vet. And I got a job working for a hospital at a high school. So I was at Framingham High School for a year. And that old master's degree that I didn't finish came knocking up on me again. I tried to finish it in 2011, 2012, and it didn't work out. I tried again in 2014 because I was also teaching in New Mexico. I was a health teacher during the day and an athletic trainer after school. So I was going to get licensed to be a teacher out there, and that was a master's program. And then it kept knocking again that we were going to need it. They said we'd be grandfathered in, but athletic training was going into a master's program. And if I didn't finish, I was potentially going to be underqualified for all these jobs because I didn't have a couple extra letters after my name, even though I had put 7-8 years into this career field, in this profession. And I couldn't do it working a traditional athletic training job. I mean, I probably could have, but it would have been really, really difficult. So I left and did industrial. I worked in industrial settings for 2 years, and I hated it. Not going to sugarcoat it. I hated it. It is not my bag at all. I like the bent and broken. Hey, does that bone supposed to look like that? The preventative side of things is fabulous, and it's great for certain people. It was not for me. I had that ambulance chaser itch. I needed to scratch so badly that I couldn't. It just wasn't enough. So I was picking up side gigs on the, per diem stuff on the side, and working 2 or 3 jobs while I was doing my master's program, while being a mom, while being a wife, while my husband was a full-time student. So it was absolute, like, it was bedlam. How we all managed to survive, I don't know, but like by some miracle we managed to. And then I got laid off. Something that you never hear of for somebody who works in sports medicine, getting laid off. But because I was working in the manufacturing and industrial side of things, I got laid off, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea what I was going to do, so I just started picking up more per diem stuff every time I could, every opportunity I had, until that's what I turned into, and I had a referee tell me, no, you're not unemployed, you're a professional freelancer. And I was like, ooh, I like those words. That sounds, yes, that sounds so much better than, no, I don't have a real job.
Absolutely.
But part of my professional freelancing landed me in Worcester and landed me with the Odessas and Coach Bertoni and the EHL. And it's the longest job I've had. The longest team or organization I've worked for has been them. So this will be season number 5, going into season number 5, doing stuff for them. And I get to see things in such a different way than I have in every other setting I've been in. And I finally finished my master's degree in May of 2019. So doesn't always happen the first time, and there's not always, like you said, there's not always like that straight route for everybody. Sometimes it's windy, curvy, upside down, and like you don't even know what end is up some days.
Oh, but yes.
You end up being exactly where you're supposed to, when you're supposed to. That's kind of, I had to just let go and like just let it happen, because I needed it. I was forcing things for so long of like, to work at this college or try this or that, and it just it wasn't happening, and I was so frustrated and so defeated, and it was starting to take it personal, because like you're like, okay, what about me? Why don't they want me? And it's not that, because it's you end up where you end up when you're supposed to end up there for a reason. And you can't mess with what the reason is. It just happens. So you kind of just have to like sit it back and wait it out. But that's the worst part, is the sitting back and waiting it out. So and I wouldn't now, looking back on it, I wouldn't really change anything. Then I absolutely would. Of like my best friend who had the D1 job and the college and this and that. I'm like, you didn't even want this. You wanted to go be a doctor. I'm the one that wanted this, and you have like the dream job. But in the meantime, she was miserable too in her own facet, because it wasn't going that well for her on the inside. And, now she's working at a high school, a place that she never thought she'd be, because she was never imagined being a high school athletic trainer. And now she loves it. So there's more than one way to get there. And sometimes you don't always have to take the same way as somebody else to get there, but you're going to end up where you're supposed to end up anyway.
Absolutely. And I know I'm talking from like a personal standpoint with like what I do, it's like when you get to work directly with a team for like a long period of time, I think it makes it a little more special, because you are able to make those like deeper personal connections and really like get to know the person and understand like how they work, which I think in your case is very helpful with what you like have to deal with them. It
can be, it really can be. It can definitely be helpful of trying to figure out what makes them tick and how to make it better, and how to make things better for them.
And what would you say, like, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but what would you say is kind of the most like rewarding part of this for you?
The most rewarding part is when they finally get to leave me alone. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. When they don't need me anymore. When they've come to me, they're hurt, they're broken, there's something going on, and I get to make them feel better, teach them how to be self-sufficient and how to take care of it themselves, so because in case it comes up in the future, and get them stronger to get them back to doing the thing that they love. Like that's the most and that's the most rewarding thing. And that's kind of the misconception with athletic trainers. Like 99% of us want you as far away from us as humanly possible. We don't want a Wounded Warrior Project, entourage all the time. We want you guys away. Like that's why it's why it's so hard to say, like, tell me what's wrong so I can keep you away from me. So I can help you stay out of here. Like that's my job, is to keep and that there was a big misconception about athletic trainers for a long time, of what we would do is we would hold people out and restrict their playing, and don't tell them where they're not going to let you play. No. Our job is to know what it is that's going on and to figure out what we can do, what the best things we can do to help you stay the hell away from us.
Yes.
You know, we're here when you need us, but we want you away.
Mm-hmm. Like, we love you, but we don't want to have you in our office.
Yes, I love you from afar. I want to love you from afar.
Oh yeah.
But that's the most rewarding thing, is to be able to watch them go back and do it on their, and go back and do the thing that they love. That's the best part.
I think this kind of touched on it too, but this is the one question I'm going to be asking everybody that I always kind of love to end these videos on. What is your why? Why do you do what you do every day?
I do what I do every day because of Jason. Because Jason was that person for me. I have spent my last over 10 years. We're gonna just leave it at that. Over 10 years of doing the best that I can do to be somebody else's Jason. Maybe not so much inspire them to become an athletic trainer and do the same things, but to be that person, to be that one safe space. If they're away from home, or not having that person in their life to be able to bounce those things off of, or to be that vulnerable in front of, be that comfortable being that vulnerable in front of. My goal from the time that I got certified and the time that I started doing this was, I want to be somebody else's Jason. So, and that's kind of the hard part, is I may never know if I've done for somebody else what he did for me, because I haven't really had an opportunity to tell him really what he did for me, that he shaped me professionally to be who and what I am now because of the way he was with me. That I regret that I don't get to, I don't even know how to contact him now in the age of social media. I had his contact info, his Instagram or Facebook for a long time, but I think he's kind of come off the grid now. I don't even know how to tell him what he did for me and how the impact he made on my life, medically, emotionally, professionally. But that's what I do it for, is because I didn't have that person at the time and I needed it. And right, wrong, or otherwise, or, you know, whether it was some sort of the universe coming together at the right time and telling me that this is what I should be doing, that the way he was with me had totally turned what I was, because I was going to go to PT school and be a physical therapist, and he completely pulled the rug right out and showed me a whole other way without even knowing that that's what he was doing. He had no idea.
That's always the best.
Yeah, he had no clue that that's what was happening in my goldfish brain at the age of 18, 19, 20 years old, that he had that profound of an impact on me all these years later, that, you know, I want somebody to be able to have that, because it was such a necessary thing for me at the time. That, yeah, my family was great. My parents were wonderful of being able to go out. My mom was like, well, really, does it really hurt? Like, it doesn't stop you from doing anything. I'm like, well, I don't let it. But, you know, he made me feel like I wasn't crazy, and he made me feel like I wasn't a baby, and he made, you know, like, he was there from jump to when he left, after I finished my sophomore year. That I want to be able to be that person for somebody else. So again, I may never know, but I hope at least at once. I hope at least it happens at least once. I hope.
And hey, you never know. You may not have him on social media, but hey, the world does some weird things, so you never know where this video could end up. Maybe
Jason. Maybe if it ever happens to find him somewhere, that he'll know. I did get to tell him once at a conference, but it was in Vegas and nobody was in the right frame of mind to hear anything.
Oh yeah.
But I did tell him, and I don't think he really heard me and understood what I said, but I owe him my career choice. Right, wrong, or otherwise, I do, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. I may have been stuck working with little kids or old people.
Your favorite.
My favorite demographic. Yes, my absolute favorite demographic.
That's what you have the hockey players for now. They act like little kids half the time.
We
love them, but they do.
They do, and it's kind of funny of like, oh, you only have the one kid. I was like, well, I have one biological one, but every year I get at least 50 or 60 new ones.
Yes.
But she's plenty.
Absolutely.
This is plenty. This is fine. No, I can't really imagine where else I could, in another facet that I could be doing what I do and being able to have the kind of impact or getting the kind of impact from them that they have on me. I'm very lucky to have been able to do what I do for this long. So I'll take it as long as I can get it. Because it's been great, and last year was tough, losing coach and everything, and it was the number of times I've cried at work. He's the reason of most of them, because I've never cried more at work than I did last year, and then I did when all that went down. And it was one of the players at the funeral, when we were at coach's funeral, had me sit with them. I sat in the middle of the players, and Coach Bertoni and Coach Feinleasing and Ruggiero were up in another section, and I just walked in with the players and sat down, and they all sat, I sat next to one, and then more came and sat on this side. And in the middle of the funeral, there was Tommy Caron was sitting on my left, and he looked over at me and he went, "Are you okay?" And I went, "Yeah, Tommy, I'll be okay." And he was like, "Well, you've been worried about us being okay for this whole time. I need to make sure that you're okay."
Oh,
I was like, "Damn it with the onions!" Like, oh, like it was like, we all kind of came together. Not that we weren't already, but it was such an unexpected circumstance that I had teenage boys checking on me that if I was okay, when for that quick second, the roles were reversed. I
was supposed to say, that's what kind of comes full circle. It's like, I'm always the one being like, "Hey, how are you?" And then they realize, "Hey, she's a person too. How are you?"
Yeah, because I think he saw me trying to not cry. Because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to let it out. I was like, "No, I can do it. And he saw me getting a little puddly and a little misty in the eyes, and but it was him turning and looking at me and putting his hand on me, going, "Are you okay?" And it was very unexpected, very, very unexpected, but it did kind of pull everything together. It kind of pulled all of us together like that. And I've never dealt with anything like that professionally before. I've never had to watch that many of us go through something like that all at the same time. So it was quite an experience, but it was a very unexpected response from a 19, 20-year-old kid that I was not expecting at all. And they were all like that. All the boys were like that. It was not what I was expecting at all. They continue to surprise me in every way. So I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky that I have that many of them that are mine in whatever facet I get to keep them. So
Yep, and that goes back to what we started this on. It's like, they're real people too. They have real feelings, as much as they, especially for guys, want to try to keep it in. They have real feelings, and they do express them from time to time. Yeah. Well, we'll end it on a good note at least. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I love that you were like, I feel like I'm not gonna have anything to talk about. We've definitely had quite a bit to talk about. This is gonna be
it's
a lengthy little episode, but yeah.
Well, you can edit some stuff, you can edit some things. It's not always the most interesting thing, nobody, aside from even my own husband, aside from when he reads the injury reports for, the Cowboys or University of Texas, going, "What's this mean? How long is he out?" That's about the extent of the interest in people's conversation and what my job is, or the confusion that I'm a personal trainer and I am the same as a strength and conditioning coach, which I am. No. I cannot motivate my own behind off of a sofa. I'm not gonna, but I can't, that's that's not what I enjoy. I don't enjoy that part of the physical activity and physical body. I enjoy the taking what's broken and fixing it and putting it back out where it needs to be, as opposed to me, that's boring, is taking a healthy person and doing those things. Not that I don't like it, maybe cut this part out. But but it's never really interesting. Athletic training is never really interesting to many people. So that was my big reservation of like, is anybody even gonna really care?
I think they will, and I think
what all goes
what
on
you
here?
mentioned at the beginning with like the Damar Hamlin thing, it's like it's become more prevalent of like they really do a lot for people. So I think like it's kind of a cool opportunity to be like, yeah, they do a lot. Like, yes, they help you get back from injuries, but like they do a lot more than that. They kind of help you emotionally too, and like make sure that like you're 100% ready in every facet to be back doing what you want to be doing.
And sometimes we have to be the gatekeeper and say no.
Yes.
If they think they're ready and we have to tell them that they're not ready.
Well, I appreciate you sitting down for this.
You did it. It's the first one.
The first one. You ended up being my first guest. I know you were nervous the whole time, but I think it was a lot of fun. I think you had some good stories to tell. We had some good laughs. We had a little emotional, probably getting a little teary in there a few times.
A little bit.
We made it through.
Yeah, a little misty. Yeah.